All right, David, let's dive into our first big counterintuitive story here in the next chapter. All right, so I would argue there there may be no more counterintuitive strategy we ever cover in the history of business than this one. Like, there's a risk of like going too big on the first one and everything else feels disappointing on the back end. But we're going to start here because this won't be perfectly chronological. All the chapters are going to go through, but it will be mostly chronological, trying to capture how everything built one on top of the other. So let's start in the summer of 2008. We have three co-founders led by now CEO Brian Chesky, and they are leading what is now no longer just renting their room to make rent. They have this fledgling business called Airbnb, and Airbnb across all categories by which you can evaluate is failing. It's not working. So let's dive in. They've gone all around trying to figure this out. So back home in San Fran, they are launched. They're out of money. They're in debt and without any traffic. So no consumers coming to their website to rent couches, bed and breakfast couches at the time. So desperate and nearly out of options, they resuscitated an idea they'd had before the DNC. So DNC, the Democratic National Convention, there's a big presidential election coming up, and they're trying to figure out how do we create some awareness. So they anchor on this idea on, all right, DNC's coming up. What do we do with this? And their idea around the DNC was to ship their hosts free breakfast that they could then in turn give to their paying guests. So what can we do? We're Air Bed and Breakfast, Airbnb. We need to give them free breakfast. So the counterintuitive notion is they end up creating two fictitious brands, Obama O's and Cap'n McCain's. So Obama is they add slogans to these cereal boxes they make. Obama O's is the breakfast of change, hope in every bowl. I mean, brilliant. A lot of brands would pay millions of dollars for that kind of advertising. Just three people in their apartment are coming up with this. And then they added a Republican version, Cap'n McCain's, a maverick in every bite. Brilliant. Like, what does that have to do with Airbnb and creating a platform to rent rooms? Doesn't seem like a whole lot, but counterintuitive, they go at it.
You know, the interesting part about that is too, they leveraged their backgrounds. They had a design background. So here they are almost, just running on fumes. So they fall back on one of their strengths, which is design. And instead of applying it to their business, they apply it to raising money for their business. But I think it's really, leveraging our strengths in business is always something. And they were not qualified to start a business. They didn't have the MBA, but man, they used what they had to do what they could, and started with what they had.
I think that's critical. So Joe Gebbia and Brian Chesky, they met at school in Rhode Island,
Right.
a design school.
Yep.
So it was like they were designers by trade,
Yes.
not generalist business people who would
Yep.
go after management or starting a company. And so that informs so much of the perspective that they bring and why a lot of the decisions they make are counterintuitive, because they didn't try to cater to, well, what does the MBA program say you should do? They're trying to work from design backwards.
Yes.
Which is a great point. How you end up at a place like this.
Bingo. And the other thing that was fascinating is that this is a recurring issue. Most people apply business thinking to a business, which is the on paper, works on paper, but they applied design thinking to a business, which was the wrong on paper, but it worked brilliantly because it was a different starting point, a different perspective, a different view of the world. But using design principles throughout their history is one of their big strengths and gives them an edge against traditional business thinking.
100%. And there's this principle, and we have an example here. I also love that they don't just have a crazy idea. They take a crazy idea and they push it to the edge of madness. Like, it wasn't just we're going to do a cereal box. David, they had Jonathan Mann, a musician, a jingle writer, write a song.
Yeah.
So literally, I'm not going to sing it, but the lyrics has in this book, "Oh my God, it's Obama O's. Mommy, can I please have some? There's a really cool cereal that you ought to know. Everybody's talking about Obama O's. Just one bite and you will understand, because every single O sings, yes, we can. Oh my God, it's Obama O's. Mommy, can I have some, please?" Like, it's not just like cereal boxes. They wrote a jingle.
And that brings in another principle that they applied is leveraging relationships, because another part of the story was they had a friend they went to design school with that was now living in California, who agreed to print the wrapper for those cereal boxes. So they bought the cereal boxes super cheap, but this guy designed the wrapper, and they hand glued the wrappers around these boxes to make it the political boxes. But I thought, when you're that scrappy at that, leveraging your relationships to come up with something like that was fascinating.
So I loved reading. There's a Brian Chesky quote around this time when they were gluing these boxes together, where Brian Chesky says, "I don't remember Mark Zuckerberg assembling cereal boxes." Like there was just like, they're doing this crazy thing. And interesting, I think two things to note as they had this counterintuitive idea. One, there was doubt.
Yep.
They weren't 100% sure that this is what they should do, but they felt like they needed to take action. They're like, all right, if we're going to go for this, we'll be willing to be bold and courageous in taking action, even when we're not 100% convinced. And then second, I think there's a difference between counterintuitive and stupid. Like you want to be like, there was some strategy they were working backwards from. So it says here, if they could produce 100,000 boxes and sell them for $2 each, they'd be able to fund the company. So they were trying to earn enough in revenue to be able to keep the lights on for long enough to try to get to product market fit. And so there was some strategy. It wasn't just like, oh, we woke up one day and we want to make cereal boxes. That would be fun. It was, we have a business problem. And they worked backwards into a really fun, creative, counterintuitive approach to solving what was an existential business problem.
The other thing that's fascinating, I remember when I went and visited Airbnb, one of the most fascinating things I walked away with is their commitment to culture. And their values were so different. Most cultures have these values, they have this list, greatness, excellence, that kind. But their values were all very unique to them. And one of the values I'll never forget, and it's really now playing out here, was one of the things you sign up for. A foundation of the culture of Airbnb is we are serial entrepreneurs. And they spell cereal like the breakfast cereal. And what it communicates to everybody and the way it's explained to everybody is we're scrappy. We're entrepreneurial. We're going to do whatever it takes to get things done. And this one little word, serial entrepreneurs, is pregnant with meaning for the members. But I think, and you and I have talked about this before, if I was working on a business and creating the values for a culture, I'd want something as powerful as serial entrepreneurs with a story like that.
Yes.
Versus a list of versus a list of all the predictable values that every company has, where if you gave me the list, I wouldn't know whether it was Coca-Cola or Delta, because it's kind of the same list. But their values were all very unique, very specific, and very germane to their story. And foundational to their story was the cereal box they created, but foundational to their culture is being a serial entrepreneur.
I read an article or an essay recently, and forgive me for not remembering who wrote it. It's not mine. But the title of the essay was called "Only Weird Behavior Survives." And the idea was, like, think about your best friends and the moments you've enjoyed with them. All the normal moments you spend with people, you forget. It's normal. It's like everything else. It's all the weird character traits, the weird quirks that the people that you know and love have that make you love them, that are memorable, that survive in stories and memory. And I think it's consistent here. So many people have the same core values. There's like a word bank of 20 core values that 99% of companies choose their core values from.
Yes.
And it's why serial entrepreneurs, spelled with a C, stands out, because it's weird, but in a provocative, fun, engaging, uniquely distinctive way.
Memorable.
And it's
like to this day, I've never forgotten it.
Yeah,
they told it to
sticky.
me once, and years ago, and I still remember. It's sticky.
Yeah,
but it was pregnant with meaning.
Yeah.
And I guess the encouragement to people listening to this podcast, to the degree you are in charge of creating values for their company, how unique are they? How pregnant with meaning are they? How germane to your company story are they? And how much do they separate you from other companies?
That's so good. Do you know who Rory Sutherland is?
Yeah.
So he's the former advertising executive in the UK for Ogilvy. He had a talk I listened to one time, and I'm going to butcher it, but my recollection was something to the effect of, like, logic only wins in air traffic control. It gets you killed in military and in business. So I think that's amazing. Essentially what they did is they had this vision of tons of boxes, $2. They found that they couldn't afford 100,000 boxes, so they cut the number of boxes down to 500 boxes but increasing the price, made them more like collector's items. They end up raising the money that they needed. All this to say, it gave them the money that they needed to survive in that moment. But there was actually a longer term payoff. A little bit later on, the three co-founders are applying to be in Y Combinator, the Paul Graham led YC. And it's interesting. They tell the story. I'm not going to give the whole story here, but they tell a story about how they almost didn't make it. And the reason they were let in was not because of the business idea or the business case for Airbnb. It was because Paul Graham heard the story about the cereal boxes and essentially said, like, these guys are cockroaches. You can't kill them. This might not be the idea, but if we invest in these people, that I think we're going to get a return because of how unkillable they are.
Yeah. And that to me is one of the major principles coming out of this whole story is, well, maybe two, based on what we were just talking about, give people some values to live up to and into. This serial entrepreneur idea. Now everybody gets hired for Airbnb, benefits from that story that, on its face looked like it had nothing to do with the company. It's like, hey, we're in the company to sell air, bed, and breakfast and that. And they were doing this thing, but it actually said everything about the company because, to your point, that they are scrappy entrepreneurs, and that's part of the identity of being part of this company. So that's kind of one thing. The other thing is we tend to want to reduce businesses to numbers on a spreadsheet or pages in a PowerPoint deck or something like that. And I think the principle for me is build a story, not just a deck, because the story is what sold it. And I remember Truett Cathy reminded me many times that businesses don't succeed or fail, people do. So if you want to build a successful business, it starts with successful people. And I've noticed in my own investments right now, I've got 7 different companies I'm invested in, but it's generally not about the business. It's about the people in the business. Because the world of entrepreneurism and the world of business has lots of unexpected twists and turns, and a lot of business plans can look good on paper. A lot of business plans can look good in the spreadsheet till they meet the real world. And then you got to have people who can navigate the twists and turns. And I think that's what he was saying. These guys are cockroaches. I'm betting on them, not necessarily their business idea, because I'm convinced they'll figure out how to make it work.
100%. And I think there's actually some belief that it was a bad business idea. It wasn't just like, hey,
oh yeah.
It was like, this is actually a terrible idea, but there might be something to these people, to your point.
You're exactly right.
All right, on to chapter 3.